Hi, I'm Delton Jubenville, and today we are going to show you how to put together a HayBoss net assembly.
Welcome everyone. Okay, just to get an idea of what the final product looks like is we have a HayBoss standard set on this table. You will see that it has various sections. We start on this end here. This is called the handle. Notice that it's got a square handle to it. And then we have a cable and we have the netting. And at the edge of the netting you will see that it's got the different areas, okay? This is the knot, and down at the bottom here we have the loop. And you'll see that the cable sits on a loop, on the knot, on the loop. Here's a knot on top and a loop, a knot on bottom, a loop. And then as we go down, then we have the rod that goes all the way here, and the cap that's on the end. In a HayBoss standard, there are 7 rods that we use. And then when you get to the end, the 7th rod, we have this end of it, which is the angle iron, because it's just a angle iron of aluminum that finishes it. One more thing to explain is that there are 2 different sized nets. The number 2 net was larger with 1 5/8 inch diamonds. The number 1 net is smaller with 1 1/4 inch diamonds. As you can see, as they're overlaid on each other, one is larger and one is smaller. The only differences are this. First of all, on the number 2 net, we were going 6 1/2 diamonds. To get the equal spacing on the number 1, we go 8 1/2 diamonds. So you will see here that here we had the handle and we had 1 loop, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 1/2. And that's the only difference. Is since it's smaller diamonds, and to get the same cable, instead of 6 1/2 loops, it's 8 1/2 loops. The other thing is that since it's smaller, you'll see here on the handle side, this little loop cannot possibly swing over the end of the handle, so you don't need to wrap around the outside. Over here on the number 2 net, if we had left this loop without the wraparound right here, it would be so loose that it could wrap around here and create a big hole for the animals to feed. So that was the number 2 net that had the wraparounds on each of the corners. But on the number 1 net, we go 8 1/2, and you don't even have to wrap around this on right by the handle and by the angle iron.
There is 3 different rubber cables in a net assembly. This is your starting cable, which goes from the handle to the first rod. Notice how it has a small loop on one end and a big loop on the other. So 1 small loop, 1 big loop is your very first cable. Then your next 6 cables are big loop, same size of loop that go from rod to rod. Last on the ends, you have a cable with a ball end. Big loop, ball end. And that goes from your last rod into your angle iron, into a keyhole in the angle iron, which you guys will see as we put a net together. You'll also need a nut and a carriage bolt that passes through the loop of the handle cable and fastens to the other side with a lock nut. And now we'll go through a full complete net assembly. We'll walk you through it as we build one. Okay, if you're building in the shop, the next step is to gather all the pieces you need. Here's a wrapped up standard net, and you'll need a handle, a standard handle, which I should grab right here. We'll have the big hole and your hole for your carriage bolt, and that's for your cable, and an angle iron. So you'll need those 2 pieces and 7 rods for a standard feeder. Okay, here we lay out our net along the table, and the first thing we're going to do is put the handle in. But notice when we lay out our net, always start with a loop, a full loop on this end going this way. And we'll go ahead and weave our handle in, and we just simply go every hole we go in.
One on top, one on bottom, one on top, one on bottom. And just weave it one on top, one on bottom until you get to the very top end. And you'll see that you had a loop at the bottom, so at the end you have a knot. Now notice that on this rod there's the hole. The hole is only on one side of the handle, and the hole is facing towards the rest of the net, right here.
Now we'll go ahead and start weaving our rods in.
On a number 2 net, the diamonds are larger. That means that the rod is going to be inserted every 6.5 diamonds. Now the way to think about this is to look at your starting point, and that's what you use to count. So right here the handle went on the loop. If you remember, we always put a loop at this beginning bottom left corner. So here we can see that there's a loop. So you can grab the loop if you want, and you count 6.5. That's 1 loop, 2 loops, 3 loops, 4 loops, 5 loops, 6 loops. And the half means that now you're going to go on top of the knot. You did 6 loops, and now you're going on top of the knot. Okay, so now you go, the first one we go, like we do a 1 on top, and then we do 3, 3, 3. Then 3 knots on top, 3 knots below. 3 knots on top, 3 knots below. Then 3 knots on top, then 3 knots below. Then 3 knots on top, and it brings you right to the end with a nice, it ends in a nice way. Okay, so that was the first rod. Now the second rod will be very similar.
Here we continue weaving the rods through the net the same way, except for now we're starting at a knot. So we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and a half would be a loop. It'll always alternate from knot to loop.
So it goes on top of the loop, and you got 1 knot, and then 3,
3, 3, 3, 3.
Okay, so to just point out the difference so you're not confused about it, is in the beginning the handle went on a loop. So this was the loop here. So then we would count loops. So this was 1, 2 loops, 3 loops, 4 loops, 5 loops, 6 loops, and after 6, now it's on a knot. That's the half. Now this one is now on a knot, so we count knots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 knots, and the half means that it went in on top of the loop. Now we're on a loop, so we're going to go counting loops. So we go 1 loop beside it, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is the 6.5 knot. And you'll notice that when we were counting the loops, you always keep the 2 ropes together. It's a double salvage. You don't put anything in between them, they stay together. So now this one's going to go on top of that first knot with 1 knot on top, and then 3, 3, 3 all the way to the end. And you'll notice on this net that when you end it, now at the very end it's sitting on top of a loop. Here it's on top of a knot, and at the top it's on top of a loop. And here it was on top of a loop, and so at the end it was on top of on the end here, it was on top of a knot. So again, we're going to go with the next pole. We see here that the pole is sitting on top of a knot. So we're going to count knots.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and a half. Continue until all 7 rods are used up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and a half. And your last one is your angle iron, which you'll weave in this way because this is the way your cable will go into the keyhole. 1 and 1, yeah, hit every hole on this one. 1 up, 1 down, 1 up, 1 down, 1 up, 1 down, 1 up, 1 down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down.
Now that we have placed the poles, the handle, and the angle iron, we are now going to be doing all of the cables. So on the handle side here, we have the cable that has a small loop on one side and the big loop on this side. The big loops always go onto the caps of these. Now, this small loop is sometimes a little too tight to work with. So a real good trick is to take pliers and just push down in there to make it nice and round. Now to start the placing, you will see that the big loop is going to be going in this direction towards the cap. So the big loop goes in the first spot. And then you go 1 up and 1 down, 1 up and 1 down, 1 up, and then it just hooks on. The way that started was, you'll see over here that your handle was sitting on a loop. So your first loop was going in, you grab the loop and you go inside the loop. So that's coming this way. You'll notice that now we have run this here through on top and then below 1, 1, 1, 1. Now it's going to go to the part that's right near the handle. So what we do is that on the last one that goes through, now instead of going through it, this last one, it's going to wrap around to make it nice and tight. Wrap around the outside of it, gives it one wrap, and now it goes in so that the loop can fit. Then we put the bolt through there. Tighten that up, and then we can finish it off with the drill. Nice and tight. So the net result is that since these squares are so large, this last one wrapped around the outside so that now it's nice and tight. Otherwise, this loop here would just pop over this whole thing, and you don't want that. That's the idea, is that now it's nice and tight. There. Now we're going to go do the one on this side here. To do this, we started it on the cable end, and we went below and above, below and above, below and above, etc., until we got to the handle. And here's the round hole that it's going to go through. So there was one wrapping on there to keep it nice and tight. The nut and the bolt go in. So the simple thing to remember is that we just changed the last one so that this part here is nice and tight. If it were loose, it'd be able to wrap down, it'd be able to wrap around the whole handle, and then it would be too loose, the animals would get in there to feed. Now we're going to go do the two on the angle iron side.
Okay, here we are starting on a knot, so we lift the first knot, go below, above. Again, make sure you got both cords, below, above, below. Then on our last one, we give a twist.
On the last one, it wraps around the outside, like that. Then it inserts into the round part and slides down the whole.
And here on a net number 2, standard number 2, which we're doing, it's red electrical tape. And you just hold this cable in place with the electrical tape. Just one simple wrap is good.
So the tape holds it in place so that it can't slide back out.
We're sitting on top of a knot, so we go the first one below the knot, above the next knot, below the next one, above the next one.
After the last one, to wrap it, it just goes one wrap from the outside. So here's the outside, and then just wrap it one wrap from the outside. Yep. And it slides in. Piece of tape to keep the ball from sliding back out. And then the reason we did this last wrap on the outside over here, you will see, is because now it's so tight that this isn't going to be able to pull over the rest of this angle iron. This is now tightened up. If we didn't wrap it from the outside, it would be inside here and this would just pull over. So now that we have finished the handle side and the angle iron side, now we will be putting the cables all through the center. And so you'll have 6 cables on each side. So you can space them out now if you want. It'll save you from walking. And these are now fairly straightforward on how you're going to insert the cables. The rule is the same thing. If you're sitting on a knot, you grab the next knot and you go below it. If you're sitting on a loop, you grab the next loop. And you can do it in any direction. So once again here, we will see that we are sitting what? We're sitting on a knot. So you grab the next knot, but you go before it. And then you just alternate as you go. Once again, here you're sitting on a knot, so you grab that knot, but you go below that knot. Now, if you're ever going to make a mistake, this is probably where it's going to be. These caps that are sitting on a loop, sometimes they look a little bit loose because the ones that are sitting on a knot are really tight, but the ones that are sitting on a loop, so the temptation is to put an extra wrapping there, but you don't do that. This one right here is perfect. It's sitting on a loop right here below, and it seems like it's quite a ways, but that's the perfect way.
Down, up, down, up, down. This rod is sitting on a knot, so we will come up on this one and then snap it in.
Yep.
Sorry though, this one's not right.
No, that's right.
This
No,
one.
that one isn't right. Okay, so here's a mistake that needs to be corrected. So if that happens, that means you have to pull both of these off, which hopefully you don't have to do too often, because they're harder to pull off than they are to snap on. Okay, but over there it had to go.
Had to
go
come
up
up.
through the knot. So you can see that any mistake you make, you can fix later. It's not a big deal. So now that we have finished all the cables, this is what it looks like. There's a cable that goes into the handle, it went through the round part, and there was a little, you go on the outside just to tighten this last one. Then there's a knot above, below, above, below, above, below, and then here, you see how pretty that is. The two cables link, and that cap is sitting on top of a knot. That means the next one it's going to be on top of a loop. On top of a loop. So there's a knot above, below, above, below, above, below. Now it's sitting on top of a loop. And then it goes into the loop, above, below. This last one is sitting on top of a knot. So that now that you have done all of the cables, you will tighten up the whole assembly. The way you do that in the shop here is on the angle iron side, you can go to where the angle iron is on the table and you can hook it on the little nails that are in the table, and then you can tighten it on the table. By pulling on it, you can put your knee and you give it a really good shake, really good pull, and that makes it nice. And then you'll see that when you've done it right, it looks really pretty. Everything is lined up. It just looks really nice the whole way. Now we roll up the net. The next step is to roll up the net, and you'll see Delton rolling it up nice and tight. And as you're rolling it, you want the rods to line up with the rods. That's what you want. You want the rods not be beside each other, but to line up with the rods. And then when you get to the very edge of the table, the easiest way is to just slide the whole thing. And then now we're going to put the angle iron up on top, and we're going to hook it on both ends. So you just find a loop that makes it nice and tight, and put the corner of the angle iron through that loop on the one side, which is the easier side. And then you're going to go do the same thing on the other side, but make it nice and tight. So now it's hooked, and that gives you the handle, and you can stack it.
There you have it. Making a net.